My name is Autumn Reynolds, and I'll be presenting on the educational giant Robert Hutchins. Robert Hutchins was born in the year 1899, the second of three sons born to a Presbyterian minister. His mother and father were said to be very different people. His father was a more stern person who was very eloquent in his speech style, which is understandable given his profession. His mother, on the other hand, was more humorous and witty. It is said that Robert Hutchins was able to gain both of these good traits from his parents and combine them together, which later made him a great speaker. He and his family later moved to Oberlin, Ohio, where he went to Oberlin College. He succeeded in schooling there, and it's recorded that he pretty much just succeeded at whatever he tried to do. Until later, when he volunteered himself to be in the ambulance service for the military, and then later served on the Italian front. The 2 years he spent there did not see much action, and it's said that he was mostly just loitering around, and it was probably the most wasteful years of his life. After he got back, he enrolled at Yale University and then went to Yale Law School. He graduated in 1925. In 1927, 2 years later, he became the dean of the Yale Law School, and then another 2 years later was made president of the University of Chicago. He was the youngest president of any university at the time, at only age 30. He stayed at Chicago until 1951 and spent the last 6 years there as counselor. Hutchins had many community and political endeavors. He helped fund and establish a lot of committees or funding programs. He helped with the formation of a committee to frame a world constitution. He helped lead the Commission on Freedom of the Press, fund the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, and he served as an associate director of the Ford Foundation and president of the Fund for the Republic. He also helped establish the Fund for Adult Education, which later became PBS. Beginning in 1943 and continuing on until his retirement in 1974, Hutchins served as chairman of the board of editors for Encyclopedia Britannica and director of the Encyclopedia Britannica, Inc. He also wrote several books. He wrote The Higher Learning in America, Education for Freedom, The Idea Oink College, The Great Conversation, The University of Utopia, Zuckerland, and No Friendly Voice. Hutchins made a lot of contributions to education while he was still living. He was an avid advocate for higher education and believed that everyone should be entitled to education. He fought a lot for freedoms in academics. He worked hard to change the society that he was in, believing that it wasn't the system of education that needed to change, but the country that it was in. He spoke a lot on radios and wrote in his books about this view that he had. And when he was president of Yale Law School, he implemented his philosophy of education, and he even took out the part of the sports which a lot of other educators did not agree with, and he was seen in a negative light by a lot of other people. But he stuck to what he believed, and that was that schools needed to focus on educating the mind and the intellectual and not on the body or other specialized areas that only apply to certain occupations. He believed that it was more about things like rhetoric and mathematics and things that would help you no matter what your job is that schools needed to focus on. And his view was that America's reason for specializing was because they were more focused on gaining money, and so they were training students to be profitable in their job rather than focusing on nurturing their intellect and critical thinking. One of the greatest contributions he made then could be argued that it was his example in following what he believed, in practicing his philosophy in the school he was president of, despite the opposition from all the other educators. a quote that he gave that kind of illustrates his philosophy of why he was focused on teaching well-rounded logic and things that could be implemented into all jobs, is, since 50% of engineering graduates do not become engineers, engineering schools should try to give them an education useful in any occupation instead of teaching them tricks that are useful, if at all, only in engineering. And that's by Robert Hutchins himself. As for the impact he's made in schools right now, there is a school, a college, that still has a curriculum based on his theories. And that is the Shimmer College in Chicago. It's called the Great Books Curriculum. And Robert Hutchins founded that, and it's still continuing. The idea, I think, of core classes or foundation classes is probably heavily influenced by him. The idea that there are basic things that need to be taught to nurture our intellect, regardless of what occupation we go into, so that we will be qualified to do more than just what we're training for. That, I think, was the personal impact learning about him had on me, and his philosophy had on me, is increasing my appreciation for foundation classes and not being so focused on just learning about the career I want to go into, but realizing that there is an important reason that we have just a basic knowledge of things like history or math, because sometimes we might not go into the occupational field that we want to, and those skills will still come in handy regardless of what field we choose. I think his philosophy, although it might be more extreme than most people would think to follow, especially sports fans, since he wasn't very fond of schools focusing more on sports than on education, I think there's a lot of good that can be gained from appreciating the things that he focused on, the rhetoric and the math, and the great books from history. And that is my presentation on Robert Hutchins. Thank you. What? What? I'm going to die.
What did it say?
Something went